My husband humiliated me in front of his friends and said he only married me out of pity. I should have noticed something was wrong the moment we walked into the restaurant. The place was packed, absolutely chaotic, with people celebrating some local sports victory. And my husband seemed unusually tense even before we sat down. His jaw was clenched in that way it got when he was irritated about something, and he kept checking his phone every few seconds as we navigated through the crowd. His two college friends were already waiting at the table near the back, waving us over with enthusiastic gestures and half-empty glasses already in front of them. The noise level was insane, everyone drinking and shouting and singing fight songs, and I remember thinking we should have picked somewhere quieter, somewhere we could actually hear ourselves think. But I didn't say anything. I had learned over the past year or so that suggesting changes to plans he had made usually ended badly, with him accusing me of being controlling or never being satisfied. So I just smiled and followed him to the table, already preparing myself for a long evening of pretending everything was fine. His friends greeted us warmly, standing up for hugs and handshakes, complimenting my outfit and making jokes about how long it had been since we all got together. They seemed genuinely happy to see us, which made what happened later even more surreal. The restaurant was decorated with sports memorabilia and had screens showing replays of the game everywhere you looked. Our server, a young guy with an enthusiastic smile, rattled off the specials over the noise of the crowd. We ordered drinks and appetizers, and for maybe 20 minutes everything seemed normal enough that I started to relax. His friends were funny, telling stories about their college days, about the ridiculous things they used to do, the pranks they pulled, the professors they drove crazy. One story involved sneaking into the campus pool at midnight and nearly getting caught by campus security. Another was about a road trip where everything that could go wrong did. I was actually enjoying myself despite the chaos around us, laughing at their stories and adding my own comments here and there. My husband even seemed to relax a little, his shoulders loosening as he drank his first drink and then ordered another. I was drinking soda because I had to drive us home, and someone needed to be clear-headed. That turned out to be more important than I realized at the time. Then one of them, the one with the beard who worked in finance, asked the question that changed everything. He leaned forward with this curious smile and said, "So how did you two actually meet?" I don't think we ever heard the full story. His wife, who had been quieter than the rest of us, nodded with interest. I opened my mouth to answer, already thinking about how to tell the story in a way that was entertaining and sweet. We had met at a mutual friend's party, talked for hours about nothing in particular, and exchanged numbers at the end of the night. It wasn't a dramatic story, but it was ours. But my husband cut me off before I could say a single word. "Oh, that's easy," he said, and something in his voice made me freeze. There was a mean edge to it, a tone I had only heard a few times before, usually when we were alone and he was angry about something. She basically begged me to date her. I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking, maybe setting up some funny punchline about how persistent I had been, or how charming he had been. He wasn't joking. The look on his face when I glanced at him made that immediately clear. "No, seriously," he continued, louder now, making sure everyone at the table could hear him over the noise of the restaurant. "She was desperate. I mean, look at her." He gestured at me like I was an object on display. "She's what, a 6 on a good day? Maybe a 7 if we're being generous and the lighting is right. She threw herself at me because she knew no one else would want her." The table went completely silent, except for the noise of the celebration happening around us. Someone at a nearby table cheered loudly about the game, their voices a stark contrast to the sudden stillness at ours. I sat there holding my glass so tightly I thought it might shatter in my hand, unable to process what I was hearing. My face felt hot, then cold, then hot again. His friends looked uncomfortable, doing that nervous laughter thing people do when they don't know how to react, when they're hoping someone will make a joke and diffuse the tension. Nobody told him to stop. Nobody said, "Hey man, that's your wife you're talking about." Nobody said anything at all that would have helped. He just kept going, taking another long drink from his glass. Honestly, the only reason I'm still married to her is because I'm too lazy to go find someone hotter. It would be such a hassle, you know. Dating apps, swiping through profiles, meeting new people and pretending to be interested in their boring stories. This is just easier. The waiter brought our appetizers right then, setting down plates of food that suddenly looked completely unappetizing. I watched him arrange them on the table. This young guy who had no idea what he was walking into, just doing his job and probably hoping for a good tip. My husband didn't even pause his monologue as the waiter worked, just continued to destroy me in front of his friends like it was the most natural thing in the world. I kept thinking someone would change the subject. Someone would make him stop. His friend's wife was staring at her plate like it was the most fascinating thing she had ever seen. The other friend kept glancing between my husband and me with this expression that might have been sympathy or might have been secondhand embarrassment. But they just sat there, looking at their plates, occasionally glancing at me with what I guess was supposed to be empathy, but felt more like they were watching a car accident and couldn't look away. Then he started making things up, and that's when I realized this wasn't just the alcohol talking or him having a bad day. This was intentional. He claimed I had become clingy and dependent after we got married, that I was constantly invading his privacy, going through his phone behind his back when he was in the shower or asleep. None of that was true. None of it. I had never once looked through his phone because I had no reason to, because I had trusted him completely. But he said it with such conviction, such certainty, that I could see his friends starting to believe him, starting to see me as this desperate, controlling wife who couldn't handle giving her husband space. When one of them tried to change the subject, suggesting ordering more drinks in this desperate, cheerful voice that fooled absolutely nobody, my husband held up his hand like a teacher silencing a classroom. No, let me finish. She needs to hear this. Everyone needs to hear this. He looked directly at me then, and I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen before, or maybe had seen but refused to acknowledge. It wasn't anger or frustration. It was contempt. Pure, undiluted contempt. I married her because I honestly thought no one else would take her. I did her a favor, really. She should be grateful. That's when I stood up. I didn't plan it, didn't think about it, didn't weigh the consequences or consider how it would look. My body just moved on its own, chair scraping loudly against the floor. I grabbed my full glass of soda, the ice cubes clinking against the sides, and held it over his head. For maybe 3 seconds, we were frozen like that. Me standing with the glass suspended above him, him staring up at me in shock, his mouth literally hanging open mid-word. His friend's eyes were wide, nobody breathing. Then I poured the entire thing on him. The liquid ran down his hair in streams, soaking into his scalp, dripping down his face and into his collar, completely drenching his shirt until it clung to his chest. The ice cubes landed on his head and shoulders, one sliding down the back of his shirt. He sat there frozen, arms held out slightly from his sides, soda dripping off his nose and chin. The people at the tables around us had gone quiet, turning to stare. Someone in the corner started laughing. I grabbed my purse, slung it over my shoulder, and walked out without saying a word. Not a single word. What was there to say that would matter? What could I possibly have said that would have made any of that better or worse? I just walked, forcing my legs to move steadily, even though everything in me wanted to run. Wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. I heard someone call my name behind me, maybe one of his friends, but I didn't turn around. I just kept walking through the crowded restaurant. Past all those happy drunk people celebrating their team's victory, past the hostess station where a young woman stared at me with wide eyes, clearly having witnessed at least part of what happened, and out into the parking lot. Outside on the street, the cold air hit my face like a slap. I started shaking so badly I couldn't get my keys out of my purse for several minutes. My hands wouldn't cooperate, trembling uncontrollably as I fumbled through the contents of my bag. Lip gloss, tissues, receipts. Why did I have so much stuff in here? Where were the damn keys? People walked past me on the sidewalk, some of them glancing at me curiously, probably wondering why I was standing there shaking and crying in front of a restaurant on a night when everyone else seemed to be celebrating. When I finally made it to the car, which was registered in both our names because he had insisted we needed to share everything, prove we were a team, I just sat in the driver's seat trying to breathe. My chest felt tight, like there was a metal band around my ribs being slowly tightened. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white, trying to ground myself, trying to stop the shaking. My phone started ringing immediately. His name lit up the screen. I declined the call. It rang again 5 seconds later. Declined. Then a text message came through. Then another. Then the phone rang again. One of his friends this time. I declined that too. I turned the sound off completely, watching the screen light up silently with incoming calls and messages as I finally got my breathing under some semblance of control. I needed to get out of there before he came looking for me. I started the car with shaking hands and drove home, probably not as carefully as I should have, my vision blurry with tears that I kept blinking away. The radio was playing some cheerful pop song that felt obscene given what had just happened. So I turned it off and drove in silence except for the sound of my own breathing and the occasional hiccup sob that escaped despite my best efforts to hold it together. I spent that night alone in our apartment with all the lights on. Every single one. I turned on the overhead lights, the lamps, even the light in the closet. I wasn't hiding from anything. If anything, I wanted to see everything clearly. Wanted to sit in bright light and process what had just happened without shadows or darkness making it worse. The apartment felt different suddenly, like I was seeing it for the first time. All our stuff mixed together, his books next to mine on the shelf, his jacket thrown over the back of the couch, our wedding photo on the wall smiling like we had been happy. Like we were a real couple who loved and respected each other. I sat on the couch scrolling mindlessly through my phone, seeing his calls and messages pile up but not reading any of them yet. The friend who had tried to change the subject at dinner sent me a message asking if I was okay. I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say. Was I okay? I had just publicly humiliated my husband at a restaurant, but he had publicly humiliated me first, worse, with words designed to cut deep and leave scars. Around 1 a.m, he showed up. I heard him before I saw him, his car pulling into the parking lot too fast, the door slamming. Then the buzzer for our apartment started ringing. Once, twice, 5 times, 10 times, over and over in rapid succession, like he was jamming his finger on the button. I sat on the couch and didn't move. He started yelling through the intercom. Let me in right now. We need to talk about this. You can't just ignore me." His words were slurred, and I realized he had continued drinking after I left. Of course he had. The buzzer rang again, long and insistent. The phone calls kept coming every 15 minutes like clockwork, and his voice messages got progressively angrier and more threatening. First, they were demanding, telling me to answer the phone, telling me we needed to talk immediately. Then they got aggressive, calling me names I won't repeat, saying I had embarrassed him in front of his friends, destroyed his reputation. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so awful. Around 1:30, he stopped ringing the buzzer and I heard his car leave, tires squealing as he drove away too fast. But the calls didn't stop. They kept coming, lighting up my silent phone screen in the dark room. At 2 a.m, when I literally could not take one more notification, one more buzz of my phone against the table, I finally blocked his number and tried to sleep. I got maybe 3 hours of fragmented, nightmare-filled rest. I kept dreaming I was back at the restaurant, except in the dream I couldn't move or speak. I just had to sit there while he talked, and everyone at the table nodded along like he was making perfect sense. When I woke up around 6 with my neck cramped from falling asleep sitting up on the couch, I temporarily unblocked him just to see what he had sent while my phone was silent. The message count was absurd, 37 messages. I scrolled through them numbly, watching his tone shift from angry to aggressive to almost pleading, then back to angry again. Most were demands. Apologize, now. You destroyed me in front of everyone. You're going to regret this. Not a single, I'm sorry. I decided I couldn't stay in that apartment one more second. Everything about it felt contaminated now, tainted by what he had said and what I was starting to understand about my marriage. I packed a bag with clothes and toiletries, my laptop, my charger, anything I might need for a few days away. I left most of my stuff there because I honestly didn't know what I was going to do long term. Couldn't think that far ahead yet. I just knew I needed to be somewhere else, somewhere that felt safe. So I drove to my parents' house. It was only 7 a.m. when I got there, but my mother answered the door in her robe immediately, like she had been waiting for something bad to happen, and here it was. Confirmed. She took one look at my face, my red eyes, my wrinkled clothes from sleeping in them, and immediately started making coffee and pulling out food and blankets, her way of showing love. She didn't ask questions right away, just moved around the kitchen efficiently, making me sit at the table and putting a mug in front of me. My father came downstairs a few minutes later, drawn by the sound of voices, and stopped in the doorway when he saw me. "What happened?" he asked, his voice still rough from sleep. So I told them. I told them everything. Every detail of that dinner, every word he had said, the way his friends had just sat there doing nothing, the soda incident, the night of calls and messages, everything. My mother's face got tighter and tighter as I talked, her mouth pressed into a thin line. My father listened to the whole story without saying a word, his fist slowly clenching on the arm of his chair until his knuckles went white. When I finished, nobody spoke for a full minute. The silence was heavy, weighted with rage on my behalf. Then he stood up carefully, deliberately, like he was controlling himself very carefully to avoid exploding. "I'm going to take care of something," he said in this quiet, dangerous voice I had only heard a few times in my life. Always when someone had seriously wronged someone he loved. He grabbed his keys from the hook by the door and left without explaining anything else. My mother and I sat there in silence for a moment after he left. Then she reached across the table and squeezed my hand so hard it almost hurt. "You're not going back there," she said. It wasn't a question. "Not until we figure this out. You're staying here as long as you need to." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without crying again. I had been trying so hard to hold it together, to be strong, to not completely fall apart. But sitting in my childhood kitchen with my mother holding my hand, I finally let myself cry properly. The kind of crying that shakes your whole body and makes it hard to breathe. My mother just held my hand and let me cry, not telling me it would be okay or that everything happens for a reason or any of those empty platitudes people say when they don't know what else to do. She just let me cry. 3 hours later, my father came back. I heard his car in the driveway. Heard him come in through the back door. He walked into the kitchen and placed a business card on the table in front of me without saying a word. I picked it up with shaking hands. A family law attorney, someone named Richard with an office downtown. There was a phone number and an email address. "He's a friend of mine from when I worked at the credit union," my father said, sitting down heavily in his chair. "Good man, knows what he's doing. I already called him and explained the situation. He's expecting to hear from you when you're ready. He doesn't charge up front, works on a percentage of whatever you can recover in the settlement." I looked at the card, then at my father. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice coming out scratchy from all the crying. My father didn't tell me where else he had been during those 3 hours besides the lawyer's office, and I didn't ask. But I noticed his knuckles were slightly red, like he had hit something, and there was a tension in his jaw that suggested he had done something he wouldn't regret, but didn't particularly want to discuss with me. My mother noticed too, but she didn't say anything either. Some things are better left unspoken. I spent the morning at my parents' house trying to distract myself with my phone. Around noon, the woman who had been at the dinner sent me a message. "Are you okay? I need to warn you. He's calling everyone. Telling people you were drunk and attacked him unprovoked. It's not true, right?" I replied immediately. "I only drank soda. He had multiple drinks." Then I made a subtle post on social media about being the only sober person in certain situations. Several people from our shared friend group started sending private messages asking what really happened. My father came home and started making food without commenting on where he had been. Minutes later, my husband showed up at my parents' front door looking disheveled and still wearing the same stained clothes from the night before. My father stood up quickly when he saw who it was. My mother grabbed my arm and whispered for me to stay seated. My husband burst through the door. "You humiliated me," he screamed, pointing at me. "Apologize now, in front of your parents." "Lower your voice," my mother said. He ignored her, moving toward me. My father stepped between us. "Back off," my father said quietly. "Now." My husband tried to push past him. Bad move. My father shoved him hard enough to make him stumble against the kitchen table. My husband tried to push my father aside like he had the right to confront me directly. My father pushed him back hard enough to make him stumble against the kitchen furniture. My mother started screaming too, ordering him to leave the property. He tried to grab my father's arm, and my father shoved him even harder toward the door. He finally left after that escalated confrontation, and my mother broke down crying from the stress. I ran upstairs to one of the bedrooms and locked myself in while my phone exploded with messages from people asking about the rumors. I made a decision then. Sitting in my childhood bedroom, I opened my phone and started typing. I crafted a detailed factual message explaining exactly what had happened. Every offensive comment he made at that dinner, quoted as precisely as I could remember. His aggressive behavior showing up at my parents' house. His attempt to physically confront my father. I kept my tone calm and factual. No drama, no exaggeration, just the truth laid out plainly. Then I attached screenshots. Messages from him demanding I apologize. Evidence of the timeline showing I had been sober while he drank multiple drinks. I reviewed everything twice to make sure it was accurate. then sent it to everyone in our mutual contacts, close friends, extended family, even his mother. The responses started coming within minutes. Some people expressed genuine shock and asked questions. Others apologized for not knowing what to say. A few sent long messages about how they always thought something felt off but couldn't put their finger on it. Some people, I noticed, read the message but didn't respond at all, which told me everything I needed to know about where they stood. His mother called my mother directly, screaming accusations about destroying their family honor. The friend who had been at the dinner sent multiple messages admitting he hadn't fully understood how serious the situation was until he witnessed it firsthand. He revealed that my husband had complained several times in private conversations about supposed problems in our marriage, always blaming me for being too controlling and insecure. He confessed he had believed that distorted version until he saw my husband's actual behavior at the restaurant. Most importantly, he offered to provide formal testimony if needed during divorce proceedings. The woman who had been there also sent a separate message confirming she was willing to testify if requested. Both of them admitted they should have intervened that night. I blocked my husband again on all channels and turned off my phone completely for several hours. Over the following days, I stayed at my parents' house while continuing to receive occasional messages from people seeking clarification. Then I decided I needed to go back to our shared apartment to collect my most important personal belongings, taking my father's car as a safety precaution. When I got to the apartment, I found a sticky note on an object deliberately left on the counter with an accusatory message. The large television and game console were gone from the living room, items he had clearly taken to wherever he was living now. Ironically, their absence made the space feel larger and more breathable. There were dirty clothes scattered across the living room floor in a pathetic display of neglect. I started the process of separating and packing my clothes, electronics, sentimental objects, and important correspondence. While sorting through personal papers and household bills, I noticed a drawer in his office that had been locked throughout our entire marriage. Except this time, the key was sitting right there in the lock. He had gotten careless, or maybe he just didn't think I would dare to look. I turned the key and opened it. Inside, I found stacks of unopened envelopes with judicial collection stamps and delinquency notices. The first envelope I opened revealed a debt of $17,000 with a finance company. The second showed $23,000 on a corporate credit card whose existence I knew nothing about. The third document was a debt execution notice from a banking institution threatening to seize marital assets. I kept opening them systematically. $22,000 from one creditor, dates showing monthly charges that escalated over time. $15,000 from another, with interest rates that made my stomach turn. $8,000 from a third. Each envelope was worse than the last, each one revealing another layer of lies and financial devastation I never saw coming. In total, $64,000 in debts accumulated during the last 2 years of our marriage without my knowledge. $64,000. I had to sit down on his office chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. That was more than I made in an entire year at my job. How had he hidden this from me? How had I not noticed warning signs, phone calls from creditors, stress about money? But I knew how. He had controlled all of our finances from the beginning, insisted on being the one to handle the bills and accounts. He said it was easier if one person managed everything, that I had my own stressful job to worry about, and he didn't mind taking care of the boring stuff. I had trusted him. I had believed him when he said everything was fine, that we were saving money, that we were being responsible adults building a life together. Every time I tried to suggest we review our budget together or talk about our long-term financial goals, he'd dismiss it with a wave and say he had it under control. My hands started trembling as I held the papers, processing the magnitude of what had been hidden. As I examined older documents organized by date, I found something that made me stop moving completely. Credit card statements showing recurring charges to a premium dating website. My vision actually blurred for a second as I processed what I was seeing. The transaction started 8 months before that fateful dinner at the restaurant. They were monthly charges of $99 identified as a premium subscription, plus additional purchases of virtual gifts and profile highlighting features totaling hundreds of dollars across multiple months. 8 months. He had been on dating websites for 8 months, while we were married, while we were living together, while I was making dinner and doing laundry and believing we had a life together. I opened his laptop, which was still connected to the network. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type, but I managed to use the same password we had always used for the home wireless connection. I accessed his email account, expecting to find it locked or password protected. but it wasn't. He had been so confident I would never look, never question, never discover. There were dozens of conversations with at least 3 different women, maybe more. I didn't count exactly because I couldn't bear to scroll through all of it. But what I did see was enough. Messages where he called them beautiful, said he couldn't wait to meet them, made plans for drinks and dinners. Explicit promises that he was in the process of separating from his wife, that it was complicated but almost over, that he just needed a few more weeks to finalize things. Photographs of him in locations I recognized from his supposed work trips over recent months, smiling at the camera with that charming smile he used to give me. Plans for future meetings, discussions about what restaurant to try next, what hotel had the best happy hour specials. He had an entire second life I knew nothing about. Suddenly, several things made perfect sense. His growing irritability over recent months, the way he would snap at me for minor things that never bothered him before. The controlling way he managed all conversations about household finances, shutting me down whenever I suggested we review our budget together or plan for future expenses. His resistance to making any kind of plans for our future together, always having an excuse when I brought up buying a house or starting a family or even just planning a vacation more than a month out. The nights he came home late from work drinks, smelling like cologne he didn't wear that morning. The weekend golf outings with friends I had never met. The business trips that seemed to multiply over the past 6 months, always to cities within driving distance. Never requiring a flight, convenient for quick escapes and easy lies. All those times he had made me feel crazy for asking questions, for wanting to be included in financial decisions, for suggesting we spend more time together. He had been gaslight me, systematically making me doubt my own instincts so I wouldn't discover what he was doing. The public humiliation at the restaurant wasn't the result of excessive alcohol or accumulated financial stress, or him having a bad day, like I had been trying to convince myself. It was a calculated attempt to force me to end the relationship because he was too cowardly to take responsibility for doing it himself. He wanted out, but didn't want to be the bad guy, didn't want to be the one who ended the marriage. So he pushed and humiliated me publicly, hoping I would be the one to finally say enough. Well, I was saying it now. Enough. I took meticulous photographs of every financial document, every compromising conversation, every suspicious bank statement, creating a digital folder organized meticulously by creditor, date, and type of evidence. Then I put everything back exactly as I found it in the locked drawer. The intense anger I had felt since that night at the restaurant transformed into something completely different. Absolute clarity that I had made the right decision to leave. I left the wedding photo face down on the shelf as a definitive, symbolic gesture of closure. I was about to leave carrying all my bags when my husband unexpectedly arrived at the apartment. He blocked the doorway and accused me of stealing property that belonged equally to him. Notably, he showed obvious signs of alcohol intoxication despite it being an inappropriate time of day. I calmly demanded he move away from the entrance, but he remained there for several minutes, physically preventing my exit. I finally managed to force my way past him, and he went inside, slamming the door violently, allowing me to leave with all my belongings. I immediately contacted the specialist attorney my father had recommended. I called Richard with shaking hands. "Can you help me?" My voice cracked. "Absolutely," he said, his tone steady and reassuring. "Bring everything you have. Documents, messages, photos of everything. We're going to make sure you're protected." I scheduled a consultation for the next day. I found and rented a small apartment on the other side of town, spending an entire week organizing and decorating the new space with my parents' help. The legal divorce process moved slowly and bureaucratically over the following weeks and months, each step feeling like it took forever, despite my lawyer Richard's efficiency and clear communication. Paperwork had to be filed with the court, then refiled when the clerk found something wrong with the formatting or a missing signature. Court dates got scheduled weeks out, then rescheduled at the last minute because of conflicts or administrative delays or a judge being out sick. Every single step required patience I didn't have, and money I barely had after discovering how much my husband had drained from our accounts. I had to gather financial records going back years, documenting every joint purchase, every shared expense, proving which debts were mine and which were his. My lawyer requested bank statements, credit card records, tax returns, mortgage documents. I spent hours sorting through boxes of papers in my new apartment, organizing everything into labeled folders. Some nights I'd be up past midnight, cross-referencing dates and amounts, making sure everything was documented and accurate. The attention to detail was exhausting, but Richard kept reminding me that thorough documentation would protect me in court. The waiting was the worst part. Weeks would go by with no progress, no communication except automated emails from the court system confirming that documents had been received and processed. I'd check my email obsessively, hoping for news, for movement, for anything that meant we were closer to being done with all this. My husband tried to delay every stage by claiming we should resolve everything privately, outside of court, just between ourselves like reasonable adults. His lawyer sent letters suggesting mediation, offering settlements that were obviously designed to protect him and leave me holding the bag for at least some of his debts. My lawyer advised me to ignore all of it, to keep pushing forward with the legal process, where everything would be documented and official. He attempted one last desperate legal maneuver about 3 weeks before the final hearing, alleging that his personal items had been improperly retained by me, that I had stolen things from the apartment that belonged to him. It was absurd. I had taken my clothes, my laptop, my books. He was claiming I had taken a watch that I had never even seen, electronics that he had clearly removed himself the day I went to collect my things. His lawyer forced an additional administrative hearing that required me to take time off work and sit in a government office while a mediator reviewed an itemized list of supposedly missing items. It resulted in absolutely nothing except wasted time and increased legal fees, which was probably the point. During the final determining hearing in court, I wore a simple dress and minimal jewelry, looking as professional and credible as possible. My lawyer had coached me on courtroom demeanor, told me to answer questions directly and honestly, to not show too much emotion even if my husband's lawyer tried to provoke me. We arrived early and sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, reviewing documents one last time. When we finally entered, the courtroom was smaller than I expected, less dramatic than what you see on television. Just a judge's bench elevated at the front, a few tables for the lawyers, some chairs for observers in the back. The walls were beige, institutional, with portraits of previous judges hung in neat rows. It smelled like old paper and floor polish. My husband was already there with his lawyer, sitting at the defendant's table, and he wouldn't look at me. Not when I walked in, not when I sat down at my own table next to Richard. He just kept his eyes fixed on the papers in front of him, his jaw clenched. I could see his leg bouncing under the table, a nervous habit I recognized from years of sitting next to him. His lawyer, an older man in an expensive-looking suit, leaned over and whispered something to him. My husband nodded without looking up. The judge entered and everyone stood. He was younger than I expected, maybe in his early 50s, with steel gray hair and reading glasses hung on a chain around his neck. He took his seat and nodded for everyone else to sit. Then the proceedings began. When the hidden debts were formally presented as documentary evidence, entered into the official court record, his lawyer tried unsuccessfully to argue they were legitimate and necessary household expenses. My client was supporting the household, his lawyer claimed, gesturing at the stack of papers. These expenditures were for joint benefit. Credit cards are often used for groceries, utilities, household maintenance. My lawyer Richard stood up, calm and methodical. Your Honor, if I may direct your attention to Exhibits 12 through 27. He walked the judge through the evidence systematically. The purchases identified on gambling and virtual casino websites, complete with dates and amounts highlighted in yellow. The multiple transfers to unidentified bank accounts that had nothing to do with household expenses. Accounts my husband had opened without my name on them, without my knowledge. The frequent ATM withdrawals in neighborhoods across town where we had never lived or worked, always in odd amounts like $270 or $390, always late at night when someone was trying to avoid being tracked or questioned. The judge examined meticulously each document we had submitted, the purchases identified on gambling and virtual casino websites, with dates and amounts highlighted. The multiple transfers to unidentified bank accounts that had nothing to do with household expenses. The frequent ATM withdrawals in neighborhoods where we had never lived or worked, always in odd amounts, always late at night. The credit card charges to dating websites, the payments for premium features, the virtual gifts purchased for other women. The judge's expression got progressively more stern as he reviewed each page. He looked up sharply. Did your wife have knowledge of these accounts? My husband mumbled something. I'm sorry? The judge's voice cut like ice. Speak up. Did your wife know about these debts? No, my husband finally said. Barely audible. The judge's expression hardened. These debts were incurred through deceptive practices and for personal benefit unrelated to marital expenses. He looked directly at my husband. The respondent bears sole responsibility. The two friends who had been at that dinner appeared and provided testimony confirming the abusive and humiliating behavior they witnessed that night. They both looked uncomfortable, clearly not enjoying having to be there. But they told the truth. They described what he had said, how he had said it, the way everyone at the table had been shocked and uncomfortable. One of them, the one with the beard, added without being asked that he had known my husband for 15 years and had never seen him treat anyone that way before, that it was completely out of line. The judge determined officially that I had no legal responsibility for debts contracted unilaterally, fraudulently, and without my consent or knowledge. His exact words were, "These debts were incurred through deceptive practices and for personal benefit unrelated to marital expenses. The respondent bears sole responsibility." Additionally, he ordered my husband to compensate me with $12,000 for proven improper use of the couple's common financial resources during our marriage. This amount represented half of what had been taken from our joint accounts and spent on his dating activities and other personal expenses. When the judge read the ruling, my husband's face went completely red. I could see his jaw clenching, his hands gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles went white. His lawyer tried to interject, to ask for a continuance or appeal or something, but the judge cut him off. "Ruling is final," he said. "Court is adjourned." As we left the courtroom, I had to walk past where my husband was still sitting with his lawyer, who was packing up documents and speaking to him in low, urgent tones. My husband looked up as I passed, and our eyes met for what I knew would be the last time. His face was completely red with contained rage and public shame, his jaw still clenched. And I could see that he wanted to say something, wanted to yell at me or blame me or make this somehow my fault. But I didn't feel victorious triumph or vindictive satisfaction looking at him. I felt nothing. Maybe that's worse than hatred, that complete absence of feeling. I just felt tired, profoundly tired, and a genuine urgency to be done with all of this and start something completely new and different. I broke eye contact first and kept walking, my lawyer beside me, out into the hallway and then out of the courthouse entirely. His mother attempted one last phone intervention a few days after the court ruling. I was surprised when her number showed up on my phone, honestly. I debated not answering, but curiosity got the better of me. She started with accusations, her voice shrill and angry, saying I had destroyed her son's life, ruined his reputation, taken everything from him when he had done nothing wrong. "He made some mistakes, but you didn't have to destroy him like this," she said. I let her talk for about 30 seconds, listening to her defend her son the way mothers do, the way I probably would have if someone hurt my child. Then I calmly explained what had actually happened, providing details she clearly hadn't heard from him. The $64,000 in secret debts, the dating websites, the messages to other women, the calculated humiliation at the restaurant. The line went quiet. Then she said, her voice much smaller, "He told me you were the one who ran up debts." Of course he had. Of course he had lied to his own mother, made himself the victim in every version of the story. We talked for a few more minutes, her tone getting progressively less accusatory and more confused, then sad. She apologized stiffly before hanging up, clearly not sure what to believe, but at least aware there was another side to the story. She never called again. After the complete finalization of the divorce with equitable division of remaining assets, which took another month of paperwork and lawyers and administrative delays, I received my fair share of what we had accumulated together. The compensation money from the court ruling came through about 6 weeks later. I managed to recover a significant portion of what had been fraudulently spent, though not everything. Some money was just gone, spent on things that couldn't be recovered or traced. He moved to a much smaller residence in another distant area of the city. I knew this because one of the friends from that dinner mentioned it in passing when I ran into her at the coffee shop, where we used to sometimes meet. She seemed to want to give me updates. Maybe thinking I wanted to know how he was doing, if he was suffering, if he regretted what he had done. But I realized with some surprise that I genuinely didn't care where he lived or how he was doing or what he felt about any of it. He had become completely irrelevant to my life, just someone I used to know, someone who turned out to be a stranger wearing a familiar face. I gradually resumed my normal life routine, though normal looked completely different now than it had before. I had to rebuild not just my daily schedule, but my entire sense of who I was as a person. For years, I had defined myself partially through my relationship, through being part of a couple, through making decisions with someone else's preferences in mind. Now I had to figure out what I actually wanted, what I actually liked, without that filter. I focused my energy on professional activities, taking on extra projects at work that I would have been too nervous or too busy to try before, volunteering for assignments that challenged me and pushed me outside my comfort zone. I started speaking up more in meetings, offering ideas I would have previously kept to myself. My boss noticed the change in me, the new confidence and initiative, and after about 4 months, she pulled me aside to say she was impressed with my recent work. A month after that conversation, I got assigned to lead a major project that resulted in a promotion about 5 months after the divorce was finalized. The extra income helped me feel more financially secure after the devastation of discovering those debts, and the professional validation reminded me that I was capable and valuable regardless of what my ex-husband had said about me. I maintained regular contact only with true friends, people who had stood by me through everything without judgment, who had offered to help me move or drive me to court, or just sit with me when I needed company. I let the fair-weather relationships fade away naturally. The people who had believed his lies or stayed neutral or suggested I should have tried harder to make the marriage work. I had no energy for maintaining friendships with people who didn't really know me or care about me. I spent my weekends meticulously caring for the new space that now belonged completely to me, making it truly mine in ways I never could when I shared a home with him. I painted an accent wall in the living room a deep blue that he would have hated, would have said was too dark, too dramatic, too bold. But I loved it. It made the room feel cozy and intentional instead of just generic and safe. I bought plants, lots of them, filling every sunny windowsill with green growing things that needed care and attention. A spider plant for the kitchen, succulents for the bathroom, a fiddle leaf fig for the corner of the living room that I probably paid too much for but made me smile every time I looked at it. Keeping them alive gave me something to focus on, something to nurture. Proof that I could be responsible for another living thing even when I felt like I could barely take care of myself. I hung pictures and artwork that I actually liked, instead of compromising on neutral, inoffensive decor that wouldn't offend anyone. A print from an artist I discovered online whose work made me feel something. A photograph I took myself on a weekend trip to the coast. My diplomas and certificates, which had been hidden away in a drawer for years because he said displaying them was tacky. Now they were framed and on the wall, visible reminders of what I had accomplished before him and what I could still accomplish without him. I bought a chair that was too expensive but ridiculously comfortable, one of those reading chairs with an ottoman that you sink into. I justified the purchase by calculating all the money I was saving, by not supporting someone else's gambling habit and dating subscriptions. That chair became my favorite spot in the apartment, where I'd sit with tea or wine depending on the day, reading or just staring out the window, thinking about nothing in particular. I didn't seek any kind of additional revenge, nor maintained any form of contact with him. I blocked him on everything and kept him blocked. I didn't drive past our old apartment to see if his car was there. I didn't check his social media through mutual friends' accounts. I didn't ask people for updates about how he was doing. I concentrated all my energy on rebuilding an independent life, definitively free from emotional abuse and psychological manipulation, on becoming the person I wanted to be, rather than staying stuck as the person he had tried to make me into. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I was sitting in that expensive chair one evening, drinking tea and reading a novel, when I realized something startling. I hadn't thought about him in almost a week, not once. I had gone through my entire work week, my weekend, my routine, without him crossing my mind. No random memories triggered by a song or a restaurant. No wondering what he was doing or who he was with. No rehearsing arguments in my head about things that had already happened and couldn't be changed. That's when I knew I had actually moved on, not just legally, but emotionally. The divorce papers made us officially separate, but this was different. This was my brain finally releasing its grip on him, finally stopping the constant background processing of our relationship and its end. The space around me felt lighter somehow, like I could finally breathe without that constant weight on my chest. I had started going to a support group for people dealing with divorce and emotional abuse at the recommendation of my therapist, who I had started seeing about 2 weeks after that dinner. The first session with the therapist had been hard. I cried through most of it, barely able to string together coherent sentences about what had happened. But she was patient and kind, and by the end of that first hour, I felt like maybe, possibly, I could survive this. At first, I went to the support group because she suggested it, and I was trying to do everything right. Trying to heal the proper way, whatever that meant. I drove to a community center on Tuesday evenings and sat in a circle with about 8 other people, all of us dealing with various stages of separation and divorce. I expected it to be awkward and uncomfortable, sitting in a circle with strangers talking about our failed marriages. And the first meeting was uncomfortable. I barely spoke, just listened to other people's stories and nodded along, not ready to share my own yet. But then I kept going, week after week, because hearing other people's stories made me feel less alone, less broken, less like I was the only person who had been fooled so completely. There was one woman there, maybe 5 years older than me, who had been through something remarkably similar. Her ex-husband had been cheating for years and hiding money and making her feel crazy when she questioned anything. We exchanged numbers after the 3rd meeting and started getting coffee outside of the group sessions. She became a real friend, someone who understood things my other friends couldn't quite grasp, no matter how hard they tried. She got the way you can feel like you're losing your mind when someone you love treats you like you're worthless, then acts confused or offended when you're upset about it. My parents stopped asking me if I was okay every single day, which was an enormous relief. For the first month or two, every phone call started with, "How are you doing? Are you okay? Do you need anything?" My mother would call in the morning to check in, then again in the evening. My father would text random times during the workday with simple messages like, "Thinking of you," or "Here if you need anything." I knew it came from love and concern, but after a while it felt suffocating, a constant reminder that I was someone to be worried about, someone broken who needed checking on. Eventually, we settled into a more normal rhythm. Sunday dinners at their house became a regular thing. We'd eat and talk about normal things, their garden, a movie my mother watched, something funny that happened at my father's work. Sometimes we'd talk about the divorce, about how the legal process was going, but it wasn't the only topic anymore. I wasn't just their daughter going through a divorce. I was becoming myself again. My father never did tell me what he did during those 3 hours before giving me the attorney's card, and I decided I was fine not knowing. I had my suspicions, of course. The red knuckles suggested he might have done something physical, might have tracked down my ex-husband and had words with him, or more than words. But he never offered details and I never asked. Some things are better left alone, especially when they're done out of protective love by someone who would do anything to keep you safe. The funny thing about recovering from something like this is that it happens in waves, not in a straight line. Some days I would wake up feeling strong and independent and proud of myself for leaving. Other days I would find myself wondering if I had overreacted, if maybe I should have tried harder to make it work. Those were the days I would pull out my phone and look at the photographs I had taken of all those debt notices and those messages to other women, just to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that it had been exactly as bad as I remembered. The settlement money helped me furnish the apartment properly and build up my savings again. I made the apartment mine. Blue walls he would have hated, plants everywhere, that ridiculously expensive but comfortable chair. Every single item was chosen by me, paid for by me. When I changed my name back legally, I cried for 20 minutes. His mother sent me a message about 7 months after everything ended. It was short, awkward, clearly something she had rewritten multiple times before sending. She said she was sorry for screaming at my mother, that she had been shocked and defensive, and hadn't understood the full situation. She didn't ask me to forgive her son or suggest we try to work things out, which I appreciated. She just apologized for her own behavior and wished me well. I sent back a brief response thanking her for reaching out, and that was the end of it. I went on some dates after 8 months. One guy spent the 3rd date calling his ex crazy. No future there. A year later, I returned to that restaurant with my friend from the support group. It was just a restaurant. The power was gone. I never saw my ex-husband again after that day at the courthouse. Sometimes I would wonder if I would run into him somewhere, in a grocery store or a parking lot, and I rehearsed what I would say, how I would act. But it never happened. The city was big enough that our paths simply didn't cross. My therapist asked what I'd learned. At first, I hated the question. It felt like forcing meaning onto trauma. But eventually, I had an answer. I learned I could survive what I thought would destroy me. I learned that anger protects you, but you must let it go before it consumes you. Most importantly, I learned that being alone is infinitely better than being with someone who makes you feel worthless. And I learned to trust my instincts. There had been signs, Like when he humiliated my cooking in front of his family, then said I was too sensitive. Never again. 2 years after that night, I'm genuinely happy. Not fake happy, not convincing myself, but actually content. I have my promotion, real friends, an apartment I love, and I'm casually seeing someone kind who never makes me feel like I should be grateful he chose me. The healing happened slowly, in tiny increments I didn't notice, until one day I realized I'd gone an entire month without thinking about what happened. And if I could go back and tell that woman sitting at the restaurant table, holding her glass and trying to understand why the man she loved was destroying her in front of strangers, I would tell her this: pour the soda, walk out, don't look back. Your life is about to get so much better, even though it doesn't feel that way right now. You're going to be more than okay. You're going to be free.